Hi, everybody. I am Kathy Goodall.
And I am Genesis Etienne.
And we are Focused at 40.
Hi, baby.
Hi, Jen Jen. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Please introduce yourself.
Oh, yes. Sorry. I am Kathy Goodall, and I am a leadership and growth coach. I'm also a marketing strategist and a sociologist.
And I am Genesis Etienne. I am a licensed mental health counselor, a marriage and family therapist. I am also, we're YouTubers now, and I'm a mommy, among multiple other things. So excited. Missing you, excited and missing you.
I'm missing you too. I can't wait for us to get together.
There's too many boundaries up here, girl. We've got too many boundaries here.
So in our last episode, we talked about toxicity. And so we promised that we were going to talk about boundaries this week. And I think the first thing that we want to reinforce is that boundaries are, when we think about boundaries, we kind of usually have a negative connotation to it. Right. And we want you to help you to shift your mindset to the fact that boundaries are actually protective. They are very protective. They are more like guardrails that prevent us from going over the edge.
Absolutely. I mean, you go up to a train stop and there are multiple ways for you to stop. There are multiple reminders and there are obstacles between you and that thing to save you, right? To save you.
Absolutely. And I believe that is a gateway for us to have a healthier life and healthier relationships.
Absolutely. I think that boundaries is a huge, so interestingly, we were thinking about the boundaries episode, and it happens to fall on the day of, last night's debacle on the Oscars, right? So we all kind of watched Will Smith really kind of lose it over a comment made by Chris Rock about his wife's balding head. And apparently, whether or not it's known that, that Chris Rock knew about her illness or not, right? It did cross Will Smith enough, to get Chris Rock smacked in the face last night. So, and I started thinking about the multiple boundaries at play there, right? Professional boundaries, there was racial boundaries. To me, there was, comedic boundaries, there's family boundaries. So tell me what you think about it a little bit. What did you think about last night?
Oh, so I didn't see it live, right? I've just been seeing all of the memes and the news stories, and nothing excuses either of their behavior. So, I mean, I appreciate that Chris is a comedian and that his joke wasn't offensive, right? I mean, it was insensitive if he knew that there was a health problem. Correct. But it wasn't offensive. And I think it was evident that Will is going through something, regardless Absolutely. Of, it's clear, even in his acceptance speech, you could see, just based on the rambling, he was dealing with a lot. And I can appreciate that, there's a lot of pressure, but he's dead wrong. Dead wrong. I'm not making an excuse.
Oh, man, it broke my heart. Mm-hmm. It broke my heart as a therapist because I feel like Will Smith has probably had to contain himself in so many ways for so long, and so that's working within a certain set of boundaries, but that alone hasn't created boundaries enough for him to feel good enough to work through the things that are really coming kind of to the surface now. You know what I mean? I'm sure he, and he said it in Hollywood, we've had to take a lot of disrespect. I mean, talk about boundaries, right? Talk about having to, go around them, having to be flexible with them for, for the likelihood of Hollywood or for, for your career, whatever it is, he's probably had to work around a lot of personal boundaries for a very long time. Not only that, his marriage is very much open and it's a public, it's been a place of public ridicule. That is boundary. I'm sure that has so many things, in between that marriage. For boundaries that have been crossed. And I mean, again, we can't speak too much on it because there's so many dynamics at play. Yeah, I mean, this is like a whole sociological experiment if we really wanted it to be. But at the end of the day, what we saw was boundaries coming undone, and how that can affect people, right? And how it affects your mental health, how it affects your community, right? How it affects your integrity
Your
in your
professional life.
profession.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
So again, there's so many boundaries I feel like we're constantly having to watch and do, whether it's with a personal relationship, whether it's with yourself, whether it's with your family. you
Yep.
know some things are cool with one person that are not cool with another person. Not only you establishing boundaries for yourself, but also respecting boundaries of other people whose boundaries may not match your boundaries. You know
Exactly.
what I mean? Talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge is that a lot of us don't realize when we are encroaching on somebody else's boundary. You know, we feel it when people are encroaching on ours, and we don't
For
even know
sure.
sometimes. We feel it through anxiety, we feel it through feelings of overwhelm, we feel it through, I mean, you're walking into a space and you start to get
Immediately.
anxious. Yeah. Or you start to feel resentment towards a particular situation or a particular person. It could be that you're at work and somebody is hovering over your desk, whether it's your boss or whoever else, and maybe they might have reason to, but they're still encroaching.
Absolutely. So it's a discomfort,
It's
right?
a
It can,
discomfort.
a type of discomfort. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you can be around the company of people and you just feel drained. That's an indication of a boundary that has been crossed.
Or uncomfortable,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you can feel, I've been in places where, and you've been spoken about it even in this podcast, about kind of when you started working in Jamaica, the being a woman in a workplace comes with a certain amount of boundaries that you had to really kind of be cognizant of at all times, because you're having to negotiate that all the time. You know what I mean? It's an incredible thing. I personally, man, in the last like 2 years, I want to say, I have become the boundary police.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the boundary police. It
Yeah.
could be in anything, even when I talk to my children, I'm putting a boundaries on the things that I'm going to say to them, how I'm going to talk to them at work. Even, I used to be one of these bosses who you could call me at 11 o'clock at night. 11 o'clock at night, because I wanted to save it. I wanted to save the moment. I wanted to make sure I was available. I wanted to make sure that I was good, right? And now I'm like, listen, you can call me until 7, and unless somebody needs a Baker Act or there's a crisis, call me at 9 a.m. You know what I mean? And prior to that, man, but you know what? Like, it gives you back your power, you know?
Boundary is a major, major part of self-care. And we don't look at it that way. Creating boundaries is a major part of self-care.
The problem is a lot of people don't know how to, or they feel guilty doing it.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
may not be ready, which is the beautiful part of 40. I think that was one of the first things. It was like, you turn 40, boom, here came up the gates, right? Because out of the clear blue, and as a result of a lot of work, so I really can't say out of the clear blue, but boundaries became a major way that I keep myself straight.
Yeah.
I keep myself happy. I keep myself emotionally available, right? I keep myself not angry, not stressed out by somebody else's things or by the way that somebody else made me feel, so it's really important. And I just don't know that a lot of people understand that they have boundaries, that it's okay to respect them, and that it's also okay for other people to not respect them. You just, your boundary is to keep that up. You know what I mean?
And I think it's important for us to talk about the fact that we can create our own boundaries, and through creating our boundaries we have to also be able to communicate it, because we can't assume that people know that this is something that we have a challenge with.
Correct.
I have friends that I've grown up with all of my life, and I'm used to going to their house whenever I feel like. They're used to coming to my house whenever I feel like. And then as we got older, my best friend, she got married, she had kids. Now I don't just show up at her house for many reasons.
Of
One, you
course.
don't know what's happening inside her house at that time. You don't even know if she's at home. So there are natural boundaries that get created over time, right? At work, like you said, I used to literally be at work at 6 a.m. until 3
Oh,
a.m.
I
And
can imagine you.
my boss even said to me, if I have maca in my bed, prickles in my bed, like, why can't I sleep?
What is it with you and not sleeping? Damn, Kat. Damn.
But it's just that I loved my job so much. And
Right.
I'll tell you this, one night I was at a meeting with an execution team at about 10 o'clock in the night. And I passed out in the parking lot and they had to take me to the hospital. And I was so dehydrated and fatigued that my body just shut down. I went to work the next day and my boss called me into his office and he said,
Go home.
No. He said, is there something I need to know? And I said, what do you mean? He said, I can't afford for you to be pregnant now. Not go home. Are you okay? None of that.
Are you kidding me right now?
Nope. And he wasn't an ass. You know what I mean? He was actually
Right.
This day is one of my favorite bosses to date. But he was just speaking his truth. And at that point, I realized that I had to care about me. Because the work would go on, the work would go on with or without me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what?
Yeah.
I used to hear all the time, if you find a good horse, you ride it. Okay? You ride it. You ride that good horse. Okay? And when people find a good horse, they do. And you know what? It only becomes a problem when they can no longer ride you to death. Because if they could ride you for a little bit, come off, you know, you get nurtured, you drink some water, you get back on and you keep it moving. But no, it's boundaries will ride you to death, and there will be very little bit left for you to take care of yourself. You know what I mean?
You know what? The company I left there and went to, I realized that's where they really helped me to understand what balance actually is in my professional life, because everybody there had most people there had families and children, and they were leaving to go to sports days and leaving to pick up kids at school and doing all of these things. And some of them even brought their kids to work. And at first I was like, this is ridiculous. But then it helped me to get a different level of exposure around what are the things that matters. And how do you now start to create boundaries? And like you said, you know, I started to learn to delegate, and delegating is a form of creating a boundary, because it's now helping you to manage your time. It's now helping you to communicate that you're now empowering somebody else to do things that you actually don't need to be doing.
Correct.
You're freeing up time to do other things that matter. So the creation of those boundaries of I'm willing to work within this time to do these tasks helps me to open up room for other things that are important in my life as well.
Things in your life, pleasant things in your life. Yeah. You know what? I read one time, empathy without boundaries is self-destruction. Yeah. And it's absolutely the truth. I think the same thing happens with anger. Right? Anger without boundaries is self-destruction, because it will ruin things. It will ruin people. It will ruin you, you know? So I wanted to quickly talk about what are some strategies for identifying personal boundaries, because I think it's really important. I don't know that everybody knows what their boundaries should even be, you know? If we grew up in a family that was very enmeshed, sometimes boundaries, you know, if you grew up in a family where you're, you know, somebody walked in while you were peeing or brushing your teeth, or, you know, there was a lot of kids and, you know, you saw each other without clothes on, and, you know, things like that. You could interrupt somebody when they're talking. All of those things are where we learn how to do boundaries, right? So we may not know that we're having an issue setting them. And so this is just something that I kind of wanted to share with our listeners and with our viewers, because I think it's important that you identify your limits, right? So clarifying what your emotional, mental, physical, spiritual limits are. Yeah. Do this by paying attention to yourself and noticing what you can tolerate and accept, as well as what makes you feel uncomfortable, right? And stressed out. So being able to just acknowledging.
No, go ahead. You talked about discomfort, and I think a lot of the time we discount the discomfort and say, oh, it's just something in passing, or something that's fleeting.
I'm anxious, or this is normal. Right. Yeah. Paying attention to your feelings is the other one. So notice the 3 key feelings that are often cues when you need to set boundaries, which is discomfort, resentment, or guilt, right? So if a particular situation, person, or an area of your life is leading you to feel uncomfortable, resentful, or guilty, these are important cues that boundaries may need setting, right? And that can be, again, in a friendship, that can be in a family relationship, that can be with work, that can be, you know, even with phone time, right? With how much time you're spending on your phone or on watching TV or you know, other things, right? Setting boundaries can kind of go across all these different areas. Yep. The other thing was to give yourself permission. right? So oftentimes, especially if we work for people, maybe we were the youngest person in our family. Sometimes we don't know that we have a place. We don't know that we have a voice. We don't know that. So give yourself permission. If you've never been given permission to talk, or you didn't have a place at the table, that's the first place to start, is by giving yourself permission to set these boundaries. Like, this is okay. When you fear how a person will respond if you set or enforce boundaries, that reaffirms that you need to set them.
Yeah.
I know that the most uncomfortable people when you set boundaries are the people that are usually breaking them.
Absolutely.
And I hate to say it, I'm so finicky. So I will say what the boundary is, and I'm working on what the consequence is for you. I tend to be like a quiet and retreat kind of, I go silent, or I get missing, because I'm still working on, if you cross my boundary enough times, I just can't be that available.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep. And that's the thing. You talk about setting boundaries, you talk about acknowledging the need for boundaries, but enforcing it is something that most of us have a big challenge with, especially when it's people that are close to us, especially when you're in a professional environment and you feel like your job might be at risk. But the only way that the boundaries are going to be upheld is if we enforce it, because we cannot depend on other people to enforce it for us.
Of course. We are the masters of our own universes, guys. I don't think enough people really understand that. But the other thing I wanted to talk about was consider your environment. So your environment is either going to support your setting of boundaries, or they're going to present an obstacle to it. Consider it anyways. You know what I mean? And again, if you're in an environment where it's more difficult to set boundaries, that's more of an indication that those boundaries need to be set.
Or
and I want you guys also to
from that situation.
Say that again.
Or you need to remove yourself from that situation.
Right. Sometimes it's situations that you kind of can't, right? So if it's your job, you're in a position of power, I would encourage people to set the boundary, and then again, consider your environment, right? Are you in a job that is going to support, a sexual harassment is a boundary, being overworked and underpaid is a boundary, right? Is your job or your boss going to support your decision to set these boundaries and be able to help you to, work through them and kind of get what you need out of your job? Or is it going to be a problem? At that point, I wouldn't say walk away, because, people have bills and families and responsibilities, but certainly start thinking about setting them. And then where are you going to be able to find those, right? So start looking for another job. Sometimes a lack of boundaries is actually, or having people not respect your boundaries is actually a catapult for something else for you. You know what I mean? So if you're in a place where you don't feel respected, or your boundaries are being respected, then it's time to start updating your resume, getting better, right? Getting better. Update the resume, go to a place where you feel more in alignment with the things that you're not cool with, because I can't work in a place where people just feel like they can just talk to me however, have me working on all types of different hours, presenting me with all types of situations that I'm not necessarily equipped or tasked to do, so it's important. It's important. And the same thing applies again in friendships, family, all types of relationships. You have an actual series. You've done a lot of stuff with boundaries, Mama, you know?
Yeah, but I think it's also important for us to, like you had said it before, creating boundaries for ourselves. So even this whole social media phase that we're going through right now, or age that we're going through, not phase.
I'm guilty.
I think a lot of us, we don't create boundaries of what we show on social media, what we expose people to on social media. And then when people have an input, we have a problem.
Absolutely. I almost felt like it was so cliche to start our show today with the whole Will Smith thing, because I felt like social media had a field day with this thing, talk about boundaries.
Yeah, but you know what though? You chose a public platform to have that display. And so unfortunately, you put yourself out there. And this is the thing that we all need to understand about social media, right? Anything that we put on social media is free game for anybody to do anything.
For everybody to have an opinion about. Yeah. Absolutely. And an interpretation. and an
Absolutely.
interpretation, because it's as objective as it gets, right? I mean,
As-
again, we're living in a world where we have a million opinions all the time, which is even more of a reason why you have to know what's important. You have to know what's cool and what's not cool. You have to know how things make you feel, And again, it's so funny because in a lot of our podcasts, I'm always talking about like, listen to your gut, follow your gut. You'll know when something doesn't feel right, guys. I call it my God, right? That's the God in me saying, hey, those are my angels saying, hey, this isn't a good thing for you. This is not a good thing for you. But you can usually tell, follow your feeling. How do you feel? What are some other cues that you need to have that reinforce your need for boundaries? Listen to your body, right? Is this something that you would be willing to try?
Yeah.
Are there some individuals that are more difficult to set boundaries with? And what about them is difficult to set that boundary with? Identify that. And you got to come up with ways. You got to come up with ways. How are some of the ways that you've set boundaries in the past?
Well, I'm a work in progress, right? So I can tell you how I set boundaries now. I set boundaries within the times that I work, especially as a consultant. People think that they can call you at any time on any day. No, I don't work like this anymore. I set boundaries with who I spend my time with and how I spend my time. Who I let into my personal space. I set boundaries around who I allow to speak into my life, who I will receive guidance from. Earlier when you talked about the freeness in our family, I mean, we grew up in a space where we weren't allowed to have closed doors in my house, right?
Right, me neither.
Our parents could come and go freely. And as an adult, I found that my mother still just walks in, no knocking,
Right.
no nothing when she
Mom.
feels like it. And I'm like, I'm 40. So now I lock the door,
Right.
So that's a start.
And I'm sorry if you don't like it, Mom, but I'm going to lock the door. Like, hello. I don't care if this is your house. Like, no, this is, no.
And I create boundaries around how I start my day, because my day sets a tone for how I start my morning sets a tone for what the rest of my day looks like. So I create boundaries around that time and what I allow to enter that space. So when I wake up in the morning, I do my devotion and I exercise, and that there's nobody that can call, or very few people that can call during that time that are
infiltrate that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think it's really, I do this. I mean, I would say the same exact thing, really being careful also about other people's, right? Emotional intelligence is really important. Being able to read people, being able to read cues, being able to read how a person is maybe feeling, their body language. So knowing kind of also what somebody else is okay with or what they're not okay with helps me. You know what I mean? But definitely being cautious with my time, being cautious with the people I allow around me. Definitely my work time, being better, feeling less guilty about not being available all the time, feeling less guilty about saying no when I don't want to, I try to I can't be available to everybody all the time. So again, kind of saying no has helped me to just, I can't, I'm not going to come up with an excuse. It just is what it is,
And even boundaries around the way that we spend our money,
Oh, absolutely.
That matter. It's okay to say no. No, we can't go out every night to eat.
No, I can't buy those shoes.
Yeah.
Even though I really want to, you know me in shoes, guys. Everybody knows me in shoes. But I think it's really, if you guys I have tons of worksheets. I have tons of things that can help you. And Catherine has a whole series on boundaries. Because I think it's interesting that we live in a time where there's so little boundaries in terms of access to people. People, if I'm live or if I'm on Instagram, people know it. If I'm on WhatsApp, people know it. It's not even like you can say, hey, I wasn't, it's just people have all types of access to you nowadays, and I think that it's more important than ever, if that is the case, to really identify your boundaries, speak them, communicate them. And again, reinforce and enforce, and again, kind of come up with your consequence. And I hate to say consequence because it sounds like a punishment, but what happens if somebody does cross your boundaries? What does that look like for you? How do you react, or how do you respond without a reaction? Because again, reaction and responding is different. How do you keep your cool? How do you stop it from happening in the future? And these are all kind of like rhetorical questions I'm throwing out there. These are things that you might want to think about, just kind of out there. What are you going to do without fighting somebody, or without fighting, your boss or your sister or your brother or, your husband about these boundaries? How in fact do you enforce them? And what are those consequences? What's a better word?
No, listen, consequence at the end of the day is not a bad thing, right? If somebody encroaches on your personal space, if somebody encroaches on one of your boundaries that you've created, you have to figure out how you are going to guard against it. So it might happen once, but how do you prevent it from happening again?
Correct.
Correct. There has to be, like you said, enforcement, right? At the end of the day, again, guys, we want you to remember that boundaries are good things. They are guardrails to help us from going over the edge. Just like when we're driving on the highway or driving on a hill, and they have guardrails on the side of the road. The guardrails are there to prevent us from going over, and that's exactly what a boundary is. It helps protect our mental space. It helps us to protect our physical space. It helps us to protect our emotional space. It's protective things that we put in place to help make us have healthier and happier lives.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think it also is a spiritual practice, because in setting a boundary, you're not allowing for things to come into your spirit. You're not allowing for things to disrupt, what your purpose is. You're not allowing for that to come into to kind of break that for you. So I also see it as incredibly spiritual.
The Bible tells us that guard our hearts and guard our minds, because whatever flows through it speaks to who we are, and that's just the reality. So
a full word, Catherine, for real.
Yeah. And so at the end of the day, like you said, that's Bible. God wants us to protect ourselves and our space and to be mindful of who we let in it. That's the discernment. That's what discernment is.
Not only that, I think that when people see you respecting yourself and putting those boundaries up for yourself, they will, right? If somebody values you enough, if somebody cares about you enough, they are going to say, you know what, this is important to her, so I'm going to allow for it to be important to me. And for the folks who don't do that, you're not that, that boundary is not that important. So don't take it personal. Look at their boundaries as well, because they also might struggle with things like that. So again, don't take it personal. We always go back to those 4 agreements, right? Yes. Anyways, you guys, any takeaways, Boo? What are we leaving the folks with today?
Take care of you. Put those boundaries in place. Jen gave you a lot of questions for you to think about and things to ask. We'll put them in the comments below so that you can process them for yourself. Think about it. Think about what are the areas in your life that you need to set boundaries. All the areas, from your personal life, which includes, your budgeting, how you eat, your health, what are the things that you're putting in place to guard against, excess and things that just don't serve you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love it. My takeaway is what you kind of said, right? So guard your heart and guard your mind, guard your pocket, guard your home, right? Yes. Ladies, guide your vaginas, right? Fellas, guide your private parts, right? Allow for your own wisdom to tell you when something's right for you and when it's not, because we all have that, and the better we get at setting boundaries, the sharper that becomes, guys. So that's what I'm leaving you with. I think this was a great conversation. I hope that Will works his stuff out. There's a lot of mental health available. I think that mental health is a big, huge topic right now. So I hope that he is working through all of that. I feel bad for them. They've gone through a lot of social stuff. So we'll see how that all works out.
Until next time, guys, this is the end of our season.
This is the end of our season? Oh no.
This is the end of our season.
I think it was awesome. We
Yeah,
had an
thank
awesome
you for
season.
sticking and staying with us for 10 episodes. We are grateful for the support. Any
Definitely.
topics that you want us to talk about or that you want some more insight on, just send us a message in our DM, or you can leave a comment under the video and let us know. Give us your feedback. And we're going to be taking a break and we will be back. Just follow us on all of our social media platforms at Focused at 40 to get more information on what we're doing and when new season will be coming.
Absolutely, guys. Have a wonderful, 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 wonderful Tuesday.
And once again, I am Kathy Goodall.
And I'm Genesis Etienne.
And we are
Focused
Focused
at
at 40.
40.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.